Sup, everyone? It is Timmy B and Joey D back at it again for the next episode of the Flea Flicker. Today, we are going to be talking about a little bit of preseason week 2. We're going to talk about some recent news that came out today on the day of recording, Joe. And likewise, we are going to take a look at the AFC East and NFC West. But, Joe, my friend, how are you doing today?
We're doing good, Tim. It was a rough Eagles
Mhm.
week or game, I should say. But it's preseason, so we're not letting it get us too down. Got some fun plans for the weekend. Going to Tennessee, seeing my family. So it should be a good time. But yeah, man, we're just living the dream over here. How about yourself, Timmy B? What's up with you?
Hey, Joey D. I'm Joey D. Excuse me. I'm doing great, my friend. The Ravens won their 19th straight preseason game, so it's all good in the hood. We'll talk about our teams in just a second. But before we get started in today's episode, folks, make sure you hit that thumbs up button to like this video. Also, comment along and subscribe if you think we're doing a great job, bad job, or if you want us to talk about anything else. Again, thumbs up, smash it, subscribe to the channel. Now, Joe, on the day of recording, we have a bunch of news today, and we talked about the AFC West last week. And we talked about how good we like Drew Lock and how this could be a giant step for him. Well, Teddy Bridgewater was named the starter in Denver. So I think our Drew Lock plans might be put aside at least from the start. But what are your thoughts on Teddy Bridgewater getting the QB1 job?
I do not like this move at all. I think it's a very conservative move by the Broncos. And, while they have a strong defense and strong pieces around Teddy, I just think that he's the more lower ceiling,
Mhm.
higher floor, lower ceiling option, while Drew Lock is more boomer bust. And I just think in a division with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, you can't afford to be conservative. You have to be aggressive and hope that Drew Lock can boom with these weapons that you've surrounded him with and with this defense. So I do not like this move by the Broncos. I think that, it might help them in some low scoring games. Again, they have a strong defense and they have a strong supporting cast. So Teddy's not going to be asked to do as much. But he also I think he had like 18 turnovers or something for the Panthers last year. It was a pretty high amount of turnovers. So people talk about Teddy as this guy who's a safe option. Kind of like an Alex Smith, very conservative. Not going to lose you games, but he's not going to win you games. And I think that's a perception that we have about Teddy Bridgewater. But he, like I said, he had a decent bit of turnovers last year for Carolina. So I'm not so sure that this is going to be the best interest for the Broncos moving forward. And now it just raises the question: what's the deal with Drew Lock now? Is he, you just invested a second round draft pick in him. So are you giving up on him? Are you moving on from him after this season and trying to trade him and find a new quarterback? Um, and then we talked about this last week. If you're going to go with Teddy Bridgewater, why not take Justin Fields? I think Justin Fields offers more upside over Teddy Bridgewater. Clearly, I think it was more of a question with Drew Lock, but I don't know. I don't like this move by the Broncos. I don't like a lot of these moves in succession now. Between passing on Fields, signing Bridgewater, and now actually starting him. I don't love it for the Broncos at all.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not the biggest fan of it either. I was really a believer in Drew Lock this year, especially once you get all these weapons. Drew Lock has been practicing with some of these guys for the past couple of seasons, off seasons, and everything. And then Teddy Bridgewater comes in and just kind of takes the job from him, and that tells us a lot. And what I've seen so far from Drew Lock in the preseason has only been good things. So we'll
Right.
see how long exactly Teddy Bridgewater is going to be starting. And then some big news today coming from Jacksonville is that they named Trevor Lawrence the starting quarterback. If it's any surprise to you, Joe, the #1 overall pick is going to be starting. But Urban Meyer
Hmm.
says he finally earned the job. Now, good news there. Trevor Lawrence, 1-1 overall. He'll be starting. But Travis Etienne, one of their other first round picks, running back out of Clemson, good friend for Trevor Lawrence. They already have that chemistry, of course, from Clemson. He got injured, and it's a Liz Frank injury in the middle of his foot. So he's going to be missing out on this season, which is a huge bummer because that was going to be a lot of fun to watch. But, Joe, give me your thoughts about Trevor Lawrence earning what Urban Meyer said, that starting job, as well as the Etienne injury.
Yeah, I mean, with the Trevor Lawrence news, I don't think it's really news at all. Um, you know, I don't really have many thoughts on it because I think everybody just kind of expected that it was going to be Trevor week one. I'm surprised that he said that he earned it after this game because I did not like what I saw out of Jacksonville in this game so far. I don't know if you've seen what Dan Orlovsky, ESPN former quarterback, has been saying, but he hates the offense that Urban Meyer and Darrell Bevel, I think Schottenheimer as well might be there, but just he is not a fan of the offense that they're implementing around Trevor, just in terms of the scheme. Um, I haven't really. I've seen like a couple plays from Trevor that have stood out to me, and he's flashed. But I feel like there's been other first round rookie quarterbacks that have looked a little bit better than him so far, and that offensive line is going to be a problem once again. With the ETN news, I was not a fan of the pick from the start, simply because I don't believe in taking a running back that high and just investing resources in a running back, on top of the fact that you invested the least amount of resources possible the previous year and got Robinson undrafted, and he had a Pro Bowl caliber season. So you follow that up with now spending a first round pick on a running back. I mean, I think that's a Urban Meyer kind of collegey type deal where he just wants to have two guys that are interchangeable. So it's definitely a blow to the resources that they just invested there. But I think that Robinson is a very good running back and can still have a very productive year. And fantasy wise, it at least gives that backfield a little more clarity. But definitely gonna hurt Trevor and that offense as a whole without ETN.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm happy Trevor is starting. I mean, once you draft a quarterback 1-1 overall, that means your team is pretty bad, or you made a bunch of trades. But in the Jaguars' case, they are really, really bad. Always picking in the top 3 or 5, except for the one year that they went to the AFC Championship game. So the Jaguars are a bad team. So it's not like Trevor Lawrence is all of a sudden going to make this a 10, 11 win team, even with Urban Meyer. Like you said, Joe, the offensive line is still pretty bad. We'll give them that. They do have some good weapons offensively with a couple of decent wide receivers. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think that ETN pick was a lot of Urban Meyer just being like, well, let's just stack up on running backs. Like I did that at Ohio State. It clearly worked here. Let's just get a bunch of athletes on the team and we'll make it work. But that's not the case in the NFL. But it is upsetting to see that injury. And we'll see how Trevor Lawrence does. I mean, I think the Jaguars are still a bad team, as we both said. But obviously, having a solid coach in place in Urban Meyer, as well as Trevor Lawrence, an amazing talent at quarterback, sure, they'll probably get 4 or 5 wins. They are going to go 1-15. Spoiler alert: I will not pick the Jaguars to go 1-15 again this year. And then, Joe, a couple of things that we'll be talking about later with the AFC East as well as the NFC West. The Jets have missing out on 2 defensive linemen right now. Vinny Curry has some blood disorder. I'm reading it was like blood clots or something like that. And then Carl Lawson tore his Achilles the other day, either in the game or practice. I'm not sure which one, but either way, they're missing out on Vinny Curry and Carl Lawson, 2 amazing players, 2 amazing defensive linemen. So these are 2 big injuries, especially with the Robert Saleh defense. Like that's a huge loss to them. Talk to us about the Jets D line.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Carl Lawson injury is, the really big one. I mean, he's been having a big camp and they've been counting on him as that edge rusher. He's had some injuries in the past, so this was a risk that they were taking. With the Vinny Curry, I mean, he's a former Eagle. He's been around the block. I wouldn't say that he's an amazing defensive lineman at this point in his career, or ever really has been amazing, but he's a veteran and he provides depth and mentorship to a young defensive line. So, that loss is definitely going to be felt. On top of that, I think they also, one of their linebackers, I believe Gerard Davis, their top free agent linebacker, also is going to be out for the next 6 weeks. So they've just been hit hard there. But I mean, overall, I don't think that the Jets were really going to be making all that much noise this year anyway. I think they're still a couple years away. But also, in addition, Quinton Williams suffered a concussion in joint practices with the Eagles. I believe he, like, to the point where he was like throwing up after practice. So yeah, I mean, he's going to be out for a little bit now. Just definitely not what Robert Saleh wants to see as a defensive head coach. But on the bright side, at least it's not an injury to Zach Wilson or something like that could
Right.
really really hurt your franchise's long term outlook.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely take a look at the Jets a little bit more in depth in just a couple of minutes. Might even be right after this. But Joe, and then as we said, two teams, AFC East and NFC West, making a trade today. The Los Angeles Rams are acquiring running back Sony Michel from the New England Patriots for a fifth round pick in 2022, and I believe a sixth round pick in 2023. It was actually interesting. A couple of months ago, I guess in training camp or even a couple of weeks ago, Field Yates, he said like this is a trade that both teams should be making. The Rams should be getting Sonny Michel, and they'll be trading a fifth round pick. And I believe Matthew Berry tweeted out and was like, I think this guy worked in the Patriots front office and worked in the front office a little bit before. So like he absolutely nailed that. Shout out to Field Yates. But
Hmm.
after the Cam Akers injury out for the season, and I believe Darrell Henderson got a little banged up in the preseason as well. This was a move that the Rams absolutely needed to make, and kind of like what you said with the Jaguars backfield, of course, not via injury, via trade. It gives us a little bit more clarity. The Patriots backfield. So talk to me briefly about this Sony Michel trade.
Yeah, with Sony Michel now in the Rams, it's clear that they're going to be a committee backfield with Daryl Henderson, Sony Michel, maybe Jake Funk, and that other undrafted guy that we keep forgetting his name. But I worry a little bit for the Rams. I mean, they spent very few resources on this. I mean, we're talking the fifth and a sixth round draft pick,
Right.
so it's not like they invested much in a guy who was drafted number or in the second round before not too long ago. I mean, him and Nick Chubb were a dynamic tandem at Georgia when they were in their prime. But Sony Michel has had some pretty significant injuries
Mhm.
just throughout his tenure with New England. I mean, he's struggled to stay healthy on a consistent basis, and so is Daryl Henderson. So I just worry, kind of having a committee of guys that haven't proven to stay healthy is a little bit of a risky kind of way to depend on your backfield. But at the same time, like I said, they did not spend many resources on him. So it's you're taking a flyer on a guy who, if he's in, and the offensive passing game is doing as well as we think it should do, then he might still be able to provide some bursts there. On the Patriots side, I'm I'm not as sure like what to think of their backfield. I guess Ramondre Stevenson has been a big name kind of breaking out in the preseason for them. It could have a role. It could be Damian Harris again. I mean, we keep hearing about Damian Harris, but I feel like never really seeing it. So I'm really not sure what to make of their running game. But this does speak to how far Sony Michel has fallen in just a few short years from being a second round draft pick and you know expected to be their lead guy for the foreseeable future to now being shipped off to LA for peanuts. So just kind of interesting to see how he's changed over the years already.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good deal for both teams, and we'll see how it pays out. It's a low risk, high reward type of deal, and obviously with the Patriots getting a little bit more draft capital, always nice if they want to make a bigger move in the draft to add that fifth or sixth round pick on, or maybe try to get a gem. Then now, Joe, before we get into a little bit of divisional talk here and a couple of divisional breakdowns, is there anything from this previous week two of the preseason that you really liked or really noticed or something that stood out to you? Obviously, wasn't the ideal game for your Philadelphia Eagles. On my end for the Ravens, I will save that for our AFC North talk as well as when we look at our team outlook. We looked okay, but my big thing is the thing that I really like. I really like what I saw out of Zach Wilson of the New York Jets going up against the Packers. Pretty decent defense, pretty decent secondary. I don't know how many starters, but that was the game on NFL Network, so I did catch a couple of drives. I kind of like what he saw. It was definitely an upgrade from week one, and I like what I saw. I think he was definitely one of the better of the rookie quarterbacks this past week in preseason week two. But Joe, anything on your end that really stuck out, whether the Eagles or just in general?
Well, overall for the preseason, what kind of comes to my mind is Jameis Winston and how good he looked with
Yeah,
those two touchdowns to Marcus Callaway. I mean, he was also efficient with his passing. I think he was like 8 of 10 or 9 of 10 before that first touchdown bomb. I can't remember how he finished, but just very efficient, which is a very different type of Jameis than we saw under Bruce Arians, where it's kind of free for all, chuck it up, go deep, and get 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns, but also maybe 30 interceptions.
right.
Now we see a little bit more of a controlled environment with Sean Payton for Jameis. So I like what I'm seeing there. I think that he's he should clearly be the starter. I was saying this for a little bit before the preseason, and his good performance. I don't think very highly of Taysom Hill as a long term QB. I mean, he's a nice gadget player, but as a week in week out starter, I don't think he's the guy. I think Jameis gives him more upside there. So I think that his performance kind of cemented that. But with the Eagles, not a lot to really talk
Yeah.
about in the bright side or the positives. Jalen Hurts was expected to start this game as well as a lot of other offensive players. And I guess going into the game, he had some stomach issues and ended up being a stomach virus. So he actually had to go to the hospital for a couple days. And, he's all good now, back at practice, looking fine. But when he ended up getting pulled from that game because of that stomach issue, Nick Sirianni and the Eagles decided to pull a couple other offensive starters, specifically among the offensive line. And it was Joe Flacco, some backup offensive linemen, and the starting wide receivers in Jalen Rager, Devontae Smith, and Quez Watkins. So we got our first taste of Devontae Smith, which was really nice to see. He did have a couple drops, but Joe Flacco out there throwing to him compared to Jalen Hurts in practice, kind of chalk that down to a little bit of jitters and miscommunication. But we really did get to see some of his route running and his ability to create separation, which is for an Eagles fan that has not seen very good wide receiver player over the last couple of years, and Greg Ward is a standard of competent wide receiver play. It's nice to see Devontae Smith and a wide receiver just be able to create separation. So, he's fun to watch. There are some good plays there. I'm sure he'll get the drops cleaned up. Outside of that, Joe Flacco very clearly demonstrated that he is the number two quarterback. So Jalen Hurts, even though he didn't play, kind of a winner in this game because is definitively not a QB competition. I mean, if Flacco is in for an extended period of time, the Eagles are going to be rough to watch on offense. So let's hope that he's just being a mentor and doing his whole Jalen Hurts Lamar thing. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But I don't want to see Joe Flacco for any extended period of time if we don't have to.
Hey man, yeah, you said it, and the Eagles are going to be kind of rough to watch most of the season. I hate to break it to you, but playing the Jets in preseason week 3, so it will be a nice, favorable matchup for some of these young receivers and Devontae Smith to continue that success before we hop into week 1. And now, Joe, let's hop into our divisional breakdown. Like I said, we're going to be doing the AFC East and the NFC West. Joe, let's start with the NFC West, just because I feel like the AFC East might be a little bit easier to talk about. The NFC West, Joe, has probably 4 teams that are all capable of not only winning the division, not only competing for a Super Bowl championship, but I could see all 4 of these teams making the playoffs now that they added 7 teams. And with the current state of the NFC East, the NFC South kind of taking a step back, as well as the NFC North that we talked about last week. I wouldn't be surprised if they got all 4 teams in. I doubt that that's going to happen. But Joe, give us your breakdown of the NFC West. Let's start with the Arizona Cardinals, a team that was 5-2 last year, played great football. I mean, they got DeAndre Hopkins, and we saw the promise of the Arizona Cardinals. Then a couple of injuries happened. Kyler Murray happened. He got injured a little bit toward the end of the season. But hey, they bring in J.J. Watt. They have an electric offense still with Murray, DeAndre Hopkins. Running game, they also brought in James Conner to kind of pair up with Chase Edmonds. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Cardinals, but is that enough to convince you, Joe, that they can actually take that step further from an 8-8 season to compete for the division title and even a Super Bowl title?
I'm not so sure that it is. For me personally, I mean, I don't love all of these free agent signings that they brought in. It feels like a lot of guys are kind of over the hill, and AJ Green, James Conner, JJ Watt. I did like the Rodney Hudson trade that they made. I mean, now they have one of the best centers in football. And I mean,
Right.
Kyler Murray definitely needs that. And I mean, they lost Patrick Peterson and didn't really replace him adequately enough, in my opinion. I mean, I think Byron Murphy is one of their starting corners, and
Mhm.
Dre Kirkpatrick maybe on the other side. I'm not sure
Looking
about
at their
that.
depth chart
Who's
right
in
now, it's
there?
Byron Murphy, Malcolm Butler, and then the
Ah,
backups are
that's it.
Darquez Denard and Robert Alford.
Yeah, so I mean, I that cornerback room does not really inspire me at all. I mean, Buda Baker's a really good safety, and they have I think they have an underrated front seven, but I just don't know if that cornerback room is going to be able to do enough to kind of slow down opposing receivers. Um, this offense could be explosive. Kyler Murray was night and day before and after the injury. Like you said, they were 5-2. He gets injured, and we really just did not see that same explosive, electric Kyler Murray in Arizona offense. Um, so to me, the Cardinals are in I would expect the Cardinals to be in fourth place in this division. I kind of have the other three teams in a one tier and the Cardinals just below. Um, and they could surprise. I mean, if Kyler takes a step, the offense as a whole does, the defense steps up. I mean, I could definitely see this team surprising and making a push because they do have a lot of weapons and a lot of creativity they can use on offense. Um, it's just such a tough division. If they're in any other division, they'd probably be competing for first place. But I have a hard time picking them over any of the other teams in this division.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of with you. I have the other three above them, definitely, and the Cardinals are still going to be a good team and could even be competing for that seventh seed in the wild card. I mean, hell, Mitch Trubisky and the Bears won that one last year. But I think the key is if Kyler Murray does go down again, their backup is Colt McCoy now, and Colt McCoy is kind of a very serviceable backup. He has won a couple of games here and there. And when you have weapons like DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Christian Kirk, they drafted Rondale Moore, the wide receiver out of Purdue. So they do have some good offensive weapons. I'm with you. I'm looking at that secondary right now, Joe, and I have a lot of questions, especially when you play Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf twice a year. You play Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and all those guys on the Rams twice
Right.
a year. You're playing George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel twice a year. So that right there, just in your division, those are going to be some tough passing matchups as well as some elite quarterbacks with Russell Wilson. I mean, Matt Stafford's a very, very good quarterback. So is either Jimmy G or Trey Lance. If it's Jimmy G in a Kyle Shanahan system, that could be a little bit dangerous. We'll see about Trey Lance still. So that's not ideal. That's probably their weak spot, and that's probably the strongest spot that they need. Now, you mentioned the front seven, Joe. J.J. Watt, Chandler Jones. They have Isaiah Simmons, who they drafted in the first round last year. They have Zaven Collins, who they drafted in the first round this year. So they are a little bit young on the linebacker core, but that front seven with J.J. Watt, Chandler Jones, pending he's still on the team. Hopefully, the Ravens do trade for Chandler Jones. But if you can get to the quarterback, maybe your secondary doesn't need to be as elite
Right.
as we expect it to be. But I'm with you, man. I don't see them taking that next step this year. Now, with that being said, Joe, let's say they do have another 8-9 win season, especially with the 17 games, 8-9, 9-8, whatever. Is Cliff Kingsbury on the hot seat?
I I think he could be. I think it just kind of depends on how the season goes. I mean, if it's, an injury to Kyler again, and that's what's kind of clearly holding the offense back, I don't think you can put that on Kingsbury. But I mean, they do have a lot of weapons. So I mean, this is a lot of pressure for this is a big season with a lot of pressure for both Kyler and Cliff Kingsbury to, really establish themselves and, make sure they have that job security and that extension. So, Cliff Kingsbury has hitched his wagon to Kyler Murray. I think that they both are either gonna succeed or fail together.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's move on, Joe, to the Seattle Seahawks. Probably, and again, I don't know who I'm picking here in the NFC West. Well, I kind of have an idea. I have talked about it with a few buddies beforehand, but honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of the Seattle Seahawks this year. They didn't do too much. Now, last year they were great. The Seahawks are always one of the better teams in September and October, and then I don't know what happened. So they just fall apart. Like they look like one of the more electric offenses in the league and one of the more electric teams. Then an injury here, injury there, bad loss here, and they really fall apart. And I don't think that we're going to see the return of that Legion of Boom Seattle team that was so deadly and dangerous. Yes, they do still have Russell Wilson. Offensive line still needs a little bit of work. The running game still needs a little bit. Well, first of all, the running game needs to be healthy. Let me say that the running game needs to be healthy. But the offensive line not fantastic, and which is not really good if you have a guy like Russell Wilson throwing to targets like Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. And like I said, for that running game, the offensive line still needs that bump. The defense is okay. Linebackers are still great. They got Jamal Adams now. We talked about that extension last week, but I don't know, Joe. I don't know if they can compete with a healthy 49ers team as the Rams this year. But what do you think about the Seahawks?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of right there with you. I definitely have a lot more questions about them going into the season than I feel like I normally do. And I'm just not as confident in them as a team overall. Now, when I look at this division, Russell Wilson is obviously, in my opinion, the clear cut best quarterback in this
Absolutely,
division.
absolutely.
And, I think that's why it's hard to pick against them because I just feel like Russell Wilson is, just like I said, he's just clear cut the number one guy in the division. They've got DK and Tyler Lockett, but I don't know if I can trust the team as a whole. I mean, the offensive line, like you said, they've got questions. Dwayne Brown has Dwayne Brown even gotten his contract figured out with them yet? I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
believe so.
I don't think so either. So, and then, with their coaching, I mean, they started off, they were letting Russ cook last year with their play calling and, dialing up a bunch of passing opportunities. And then it all just disappeared. And they try to get back to this downhill, run the ball defensive type team. And I mean, they're just not that team anymore. And I feel like we have this exact same conversation every year. Like when are they going to get it? You have Russell Wilson and you're wasting him.
Right.
Just let it rip. So, I worry about Seattle. It's hard for me to, it's hard for me to feel good about any of these teams because I think it really could be any of them. I think they're all so good. Um, Russell Wilson is the only reason why I would be, inclined to pick Seattle, but I'm still really not sure which way I'm going to go with this division overall. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and my big thing too is they didn't really give Russell Wilson any weapons outside of Lockett and DK Metcalf. Looking at the depth chart right now, if you cover those two up, Joe, I mean, Freddie Swain as your third receiver. I mean, Dwayne Eskridge, Penny Hart, Kate Johnson. Tight ends are Gerald Everett and Will Disley. Very serviceable, but to me, like those guys are kind of like a Dwayne Allen. They'll have like a good week or
Right.
two, and then other than that, they're just mediocre. So
Hey, don't disrespect Will Disley. That
hey,
man,
I'm
when
not
he was
dissing. I'm
healthy
not
two
dissing
years
on Will
ago,
Disley, but
yo, best free agent tight end waiver pickup I had ever made. Like, oh my god, this man was scoring touchdowns left and right. Like, he's got good chemistry with Wilson.
right.
Gerald Everett is also an athletic tight end. So I think that if those guys stay healthy, that's a little bit better tight end duo than I think we give it credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. And another key too is looking at their depth chart. Should Chris Carson get injured, which is likely, it's same for Rashad Penny.
Right.
Travis Homer and DJ Dallas are now the third and fourth running backs. They were getting a lot of time on the field last year, so that's definitely some at least good depth when healthy. That they have the experience. So if they need a quick break playoff, Travis Homer and DJ Dallas can do it. But yeah, I if Russell Wilson was not the quarterback, I think we'd be saying Seattle is probably going in fourth place. That's just how good and
Yeah.
how elite Russell Wilson is,
Yeah.
especially in this division. Like he's good for a couple of wins, as we see, but we got to let him cook. We'll see if that changes. And the good news is, Joe, bringing up the schedule again. But the NFC West plays the AFC South this year, so that's a couple of later games on the schedule, we'll say. And I believe they also play the NFC North, which again could be a couple of lighter games as well. And of course, we do have the annual Seahawks and Vikings. It's not a Monday night or Sunday night football this year, Joe. I'm a little disappointed looking at that schedule, but. Some favorable matchups, especially early on for the Seahawks. Now, Joe, if you want to talk about the 49ers or the Rams next, I'll let you pick this one.
Let's go with the 49ers.
Alrighty, Joe. Well, the San Francisco 49ers, 2 years ago, they were in the Super Bowl, NFC champion. Last year, they had a bunch of injuries, not only to their quarterback, Jimmy G, not only to their probably one of the best tight ends in the league, probably number two, George Kittle. They were just riddled with injuries, riddled. But they still kind of put together a decent season. You know, they had a couple of upsets, couple of bad time losses, but I think the 49ers are going to be back. I mean, Kyle Shanahan as the coach can never rule them out. Now, the only question, obviously, the big question here, Joe, is what are they doing at the quarterback position? Is it going to be Jimmy G? Is it going to be Trey Lance? You don't take the number three pick to have him sit for 2, 3 seasons like we might have seen with an Aaron Rodgers. You draft a quarterback at number 3, you betcha he's going to be starting either this year or at some point next year. So we'll just kick it off there to start our conversation on the 49ers. What are they going to do at quarterback?
Yeah, I think that what they're gonna do is they're gonna start Jimmy G for the beginning of the season and kind of see how it goes. I think that from what I understand, Trey Lance is a little bit more ahead of where they expected him to be at this
That's good.
point. You know, but Kyle Shanahan's offense, it takes a lot of time to really get down and understand. I mean, let's not forget that when the 49ers traded for Jimmy G, I think that he was still on the bench for them for 4 to 6 weeks after they had acquired him before he was actually starting games. And I think that's when CJ
Right.
Beathard was playing a little bit more for him. I mean, it's a complex system for any quarterback to get down. But when you're a rookie coming out of North Dakota State, and your team North Dakota, they didn't play last year with COVID, did they? Like,
No,
I'm
they
pretty
they
sure he
only
had
played
like,
one game, and
yeah,
it was for like NFL scouts, so Trey Lance could have
right,
an extra game or a little bit of film. I
yeah.
think they obviously beat whoever they were playing like 65-0. But yes, they did end up playing at least one game for some 2020 footage for Trey Lance.
Right. So I mean, that's just again, like he's just a little bit more behind than he normally would be, kind of coming into this system. So I just don't really see them throwing him into the fire week one. I think that we I do this, and I think a lot of people do this. Is we kind of talk a little bit of smack about Jimmy G, and kind of put him down as just a product of Kyle Shanahan's system. And I think that to a degree that is fair, but we have to also remember that when he's been the starter, he has a really, really good record, man. I mean, I wish I had these stats off the
I mean,
top of my
during the
head
Brady
right now.
suspension, Joe, on the
Like,
Patriots, he went 3-0 or 3-1 or
right,
4-0, I believe. So he won, and people were saying at that time they were like, "Hey, 2-2 at best." It was a lighter schedule, but they did have some tough matchups. He went 3-1 or 4-0. I don't know off the top of my head, but he definitely surprised a lot of people in those first couple of games when he was the Patriots quarterback.
right. So, I mean, this 49ers team, I mean, as a whole, this is pretty much the same Super Bowl roster that it was 2 seasons ago. I mean, they just got to be healthy, and
Right.
that's the big question to me. I mean, it's those two things. It's how is the quarterback position going to play out, and how is this team going to come back from all these injuries? Because I mean, there's so many key positions and key young players that you're counting on as fixtures moving forward, like Nick Bosa,
Right.
a George Kittle, Debo, Brandon Ayuk, Raheem Mostert's been banged up a lot. So a lot of people coming back from injury that it's just going to be you know a lot of the season is going to depend on how they respond to coming back from last season, how they can adapt and kind of move forward. So I think that whether it's Trey Lance or Jimmy G, we're still going to be seeing a high level of offense, kind of be put up. I mean, whether it's through the run game or through just efficiency on offense. I think that if Trey Lance does become the starter, it'll be a lot flashier and we'll see a lot more big plays. Some a little bit more positive, some a little bit more negative, as he continues to grow. But I do think that Trey Lance ultimately offers you tremendously more upside than Jimmy G ever can. So it definitely, bodes for the 49ers to put him in sooner rather than later so you can get that experience. You can see what you have with him and, start having that explosive offense in a really tough division. So, that's why it's tough to,
Yeah.
really be all in with the 49ers because, like, I want to, like, I picked them to go to the Super Bowl last year and they had all of these injuries. So, like, it's the same team basically, plus, maybe an upgrade at QB depending on how Trey Lance goes. So, like, why would I not want to pick them? But I just don't know with the injuries.
Yeah.
So it's tough to say. But I really think that this team, if healthy, is going to be a very, very competitive once again, like they were 2 years ago.
No, I agree, and I'm looking at their depth chart right now, Joe. And on the defensive side of the ball, they have 6 people listed as questionable right now, so that defense is already banged up. They also lost Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator, one of the masterminds of
Right.
this defense. Let's see. D'Amico Ryans is the defensive coordinator.
Oh,
Wow, look at
former
him.
former Philadelphia Eagles starting middle linebacker.
But the
He
good
was
news is
traded
he
from
he
the Texans for like a fourth round pick.
yeah, so he's been the inside linebackers coach the last couple of years, their defensive quality coach. So he has been in Salah's system, and so he has been with the team.
Right.
So he's been through it all. He's been through some bad years and been through some good years. So that's good. But that's a very banged up defense, Joe, and I'm excited for the 49ers. If that offense stays healthy, whether the defense stays healthy or not, this offense in Kyle Shanahan's system is going to put up points, 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 points. And we'll see with the defense. That's why they were so good when they went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago, is they were putting up points. Their defense was lights out. They were beating people 35-10. Now, with everybody being injured on the defense, we even saw them last year with CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins and God knows who was at quarterback. They were still putting up points with those type of talent. They just kept losing games 36-35 instead of winning 35-10 with all those defensive injuries. So either way, it's going to be a fun team to watch. They do have a solid backup should Jimmy G get hurt again. They got Mostert, Trey Sermon, rookie out of Ohio State. He's going to
Right.
be electric. He might even steal some snaps later in the season for the
I
49ers.
think so too.
Third down, or I'm sorry, the third back on the depth chart is Wayne Gallman, a serviceable back that we saw last year with the Giants as well. So that running back is going to be fun. Obviously, Debo, Ayuk, they have Mohamed Sanu. Of course, you have George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk at fullback. Great offensive line. This is definitely going to be a fun team to watch early on, and it'll be interesting to see, Joe. Now, again, schedule. I hate to bring it up, but their first two games are against the Lions and the Eagles. So obviously, if they go 0-2, they might pull the plug on Jimmy G a little bit early, which should be wins. But if they win that, then they have the Packers, Seahawks, Cardinals. If they start 4-0, 5-0, Trey Lance is on the bench the rest of the season. Jimmy G is the quarterback. But if they have a slow
Right.
start, they have a bye in week 6. They have a very early bye. So if they're struggling a little bit, boom, easy to plug in Trey Lance for a second half comeback. So definitely excited to see if the 49ers can stay healthy. And Joe, now the last team in the NFC West, we got the Los Angeles Rams, who also was in the Super Bowl recently, also has won the NFC. They got Matthew Stafford as their quarterback now, which I'm excited to. They just got Sony Michel that we talked about right now. He's currently listed number 2 behind Darrell Henderson. However, Darrell Henderson did get a little bit banged up this past week in the preseason, but they still have Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, a solid kind of wildcat, end around, speedy type of guy. They now have Deshaun Jackson, who is a deep threat, which I'm sure Matthew Stafford would sure love. Still got Tyler Higbee. They still have Andrew Whitworth, who's like 500 years old at left tackle. I mean,
Mhm.
good for him, especially coming back after a season-ending injury. And of course, they have the best defensive player in the league in Aaron Donald. So, Joe, let's hear about the Los Angeles Rams. Can they return to those couple of years ago when they were just dominating people, much like the 49ers 2 years ago?
Yeah, I really think they can, but the only hesitation I have with them is that it's more of a projection with them because I expect Stafford to be a significant upgrade over Jared Goff in that Sean McVay system. I expect us to see some of the best offensive production both out of Matt Stafford and out of the LA Rams in Sean McVay's tenure. So I'm expecting it to be a big year for them offensively. Again, it's a projection. It looks great on paper. It seems like it makes sense, but we don't know for sure until we see it. And on the defensive side of the ball, like you said, they still have Aaron Donald. They did lose a couple other pieces, like John Johnson, one of their starting safeties, as well as Brandon Staley, their defensive coordinator. So that's my only question with their defense. I mean, it was a very kind of ahead of the curve defense
Right.
last year, doing a lot of things that nobody else was really doing. But now the architect behind that defense is now the head coach in Los Angeles, and I'm not sure if we're going to see that same type of defensive production. So it's like I said, just that's my kind of concerns with the Rams. I think that this offense can absolutely be one of the most explosive, most fun offenses to watch in the NFL. I just don't know for sure if that's what's going to happen because I haven't seen Matt Stafford on the Rams yet. I love the idea of it. I'm excited to watch it. I think it will do well. We just haven't seen it yet, so I'm really looking forward to see how it goes there. But that's why these three teams,
Yeah.
I just don't know which one to go with. So, I got to do a little bit more research before I'm ready to make a call. but I think I'm pretty confident that the Cardinals will be in fourth place, and it'll be one of those three teams that wins the division.
Yeah, I'm confident in saying that as well, and I'm with you. I'm very excited for Matt Stafford. I would love him to be successful here for the Rams. I would love for him to win a playoff game finally and actually make a deep run now that he's in a system and he has the pieces in place. Like I was saying, Robert Woods, Cooper Cup, two guys that are great. They now have Deshaun Jackson, so they have a deep threat, and let Robert Woods and Cooper Cup do their own thing. Van Jefferson as well, Tyler Higbee, very good tight end as well. And of course, when you have Aaron Donald on the defensive line and Jalen Ramsey in the secondary, that's going to be a problem for offenses. And then you still have Leonard Floyd. I mean, Kenny Young has done surprising. Thank you for Marcus Peters, by the way, trading Kenny Young, Rams. So I'm excited for the Rams this season, but I'm with you, Joe. It's all based on projection. Now, I do have a question, much like the Cliff Kingsbury. Sean McVay was that hot guy a couple of years ago, the hot system. Everybody wanted to hire McVay's assistants or people who've worked with McVay before. And now the last couple of years, that offense is, not has been as electric since they went to the Super Bowl. So if they have another kind of mediocre, middle of the path season, is Sean McVay on the hot seat?
I would say yes, or at least he should be. I mean, if they have invested so many draft picks in trades for star players and big, I've it's crazy to me that the Rams are just throwing these draft picks for all these big name players like it's nothing. But I mean, they keep bringing them in, but this is a window that they have that's now rapidly going to close. Like when you do that, you're not investing in young draft pick homegrown talent. So it's hard to have that window kind of remain open longer. And I think that right now Matt Stafford. I mean, if you're Sean McVay and you go to the GM and the owners and you're saying, hey, I can still be elite. Like I'm telling you, like all I need is a better quarterback than Jared Goff, and Matt Stafford is a great fit. And if they still don't do well after they just traded all these resources for him, then yeah, I think he absolutely should be on the hot seat because there's no excuse as to why you can't get a top five offense out of this team this upcoming season.
No, I definitely agree with you on that, Joe. Now it's time to flip back over to the AFC East. Probably going to be a little bit of a shorter conversation as the Bills are probably the second best team in the AFC, right behind the Chiefs. No doubt about it. They were both in the AFC Championship game last year. The rest of the division is on the up and up, and a lot of unknowns too. We don't know what's happening with New England. We don't know if Tua is going to take that next step as a young quarterback with that young Dolphins team as well. Likewise for the Jets, I mean, they're going to improve a little bit, but by how much in Zach Wilson and Robert Sala's first year? So, Joe, we'll start with the Bills. And this is interesting that I just thought about this. The Colts missed a field goal last year in the wild card game. And if he made that, we're looking at overtime. Likewise, in the divisional round, had Justin Tucker made a couple of those early kicks, or maybe Lamar didn't throw that pick six deep in the Bills' territory, the Bills could easily lost for those first two playoff games. Now, obviously, going up against Mahomes, it was a little bit of a tougher challenge in the AFC Championship game. But I don't think, without a doubt, that this is probably the second best team in the AFC. But what do they need to do, Joe, to take that next step to say, all right, Chiefs? And we'll ask this about the Ravens and the Browns and some other AFC teams as we get to those divisions. But what did the Bills need to do to take that next step to say, all right, we're not second to the Chiefs. We can go into Arrowhead in the playoffs and beat them, or maybe we get that number one seed and they come here. How do they take that next step to truly be an AFC elite team?
I think they have to be more balanced on offense is really where it starts. I mean, they had no run game to speak of for a lot of last season. And I mean, a lot of that also has to do with their philosophy where, they're kind of like, let's be ahead of the chains, on first and second down and, not even get to third down. Let's not even worry about being in like third and long because it's either going to be already first down and, our next, couple snaps or, third and one or something. So, their philosophy just doesn't really value the running back and, the running game in general. I mean, I think it was one of the playoff games where Devin Singletary and like their Zach Moss didn't have any carries in like the entire first half.
I believe it was the Ravens game. Yeah, I think they
Okay,
threw
yeah,
like 17 out of the 18 plays or something like that. And the other one was like a direct snap or something like that.
exactly. So I mean, in my mind, I mean, it's not sustainable, especially in the playoffs. I mean, in that cold weather when you need to ground and pound and win time of possession, especially against some of these top teams like the Chiefs. I mean, okay, yeah, you can go back with Josh Allen now. You can go back and forth with Mahomes, you know, points for points, like that's probably the only quarterback and team that I would say could consistently do that.
Right.
But then it kind of leaves it up to a little bit more chance. If a big play doesn't go your way, you throw a pick, you turn it over on turn it over on downs one drive or whatever. Now you're you know one or two touchdowns behind, and that's why you lose. Versus time of possession, keep Mahomes off the field and just dominate the clock, and stay fresh. That's in my mind a little bit more of a sustainable formula to win against those top teams
Right.
rather than having Josh Allen just chuck it 50 times a game. So I think that that's really where it starts for the Bills, just being a more balanced team. And honestly, they didn't really add much to the run game, in my opinion. So I don't know if we'll really see that shift in philosophy this season.
No, I'm with you, Joe, and I'm looking at their roster right now. It looks very similar to last year. I mean, looks like their big addition was Emmanuel Sanders, who was a very serviceable wide receiver, especially, excuse me, pairing with Diggs and Cole Beasley as well. But they seemed pretty complacent in a lot of their offseason moves. Like I said, looking at their roster, it looks pretty similar to last year, which obviously they're a really good team, but there's always room for improvement. There's always room to get that. Obviously, they just signed Josh Allen to a big extension. So, needless to say, I'm still picking the Bills to win the division. Now, Joe, last week
Right.
I said the Chiefs are going to run away with the division. You said, not so fast, my friend. Look out for the Chargers. Is there a team in the AFC East where you're about to be like, hold on, friend, like, watch out for this team? I guess my question is, who do you think is coming in second in the division, and could they give their Bills a run for their money?
Yeah, I think it's either going to be the Dolphins, the Patriots. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Like, I don't think anyone's expecting the Jets to be competitive. I don't think that either the Dolphins or the Patriots are good enough to give the Bills a run for their money with the division. But I think that they could sneak in as wild card teams, one or both of them. Just kind of depending on how the season goes. I guess starting with I'll start with the Dolphins because
Sure.
I feel a little bit better about them than I do the Patriots. I mean, I really like Brian Flores as a head coach. I really think that he's kind of shifted that culture and just big plays waiting to happen. I mean, they've really turned that defense around. Just in a flash. I mean, last year I couldn't believe how many fantasy points that defense was getting like every single week. But I think that this team will just go as far as Tua takes them. And I just don't know if he's the guy or not. I just need to see a little bit more out of him because last year, I mean, I just didn't see enough to be convinced that he's the guy and he can keep up with the Josh Allen led offense. So I think they adding Jalen Waddle made sense. They got to get some better receivers there. But I just don't love the offense as a whole, and I'm not a Tua believer yet. And I mean, it was a rookie season. Quarterbacks go have big jumps from rookie season to their second season all the time. I'm not saying it can't happen. I am saying I hope it doesn't happen because the Eagles get the Dolphins' first round pick. So I hope they're garbage, but I think that they're going to be a competitive team and probably around that 9-8, maybe 10-7 mark if I had to guess. Where are your thoughts on them, Tim?
No, I'm kind of with you right there. I think that they're going to be coming in second as well. 10 wins might be a little bit stretched for now because you nailed it, Joe. They're going to go as far as Tua is going to take them. That defense and that scheme that Brian Flores has is going to keep the Dolphins in pretty much every single game. As we saw last year, they were pretty much in every single game. And you also nailed it. My big question is the wide receivers. Now, they drafted Jalen Waddle. They had their choice of wide receivers. They decided to go with Jalen Waddle, who Tua knows from college, as we all know. But then I'm seeing Devontae Parker's more or less always injured. Will Fuller is suspended. And of course, Albert Wilson and Preston Williams are always that 1 week wonder, that 2 week wonder. That they're very serviceable. Mike Gesicki at tight end. I love their running game, though. I love Myles Gaskin. I like Malcolm Brown as a solid backup.
See that I don't even know if Miles Gaskin is the starter. I think that like they have like such a weird committee. I mean, I guess like I might be looking at it a little bit more of a fantasy lens, but
Yeah,
you know, I don't know. I feel like I've heard some about in the preseason, like Gaskin is not as much work as a lot of people were expecting, and just might be a little bit more of a committee. Gaskin, Malcolm Brown, and I think that rookie they had last year, Ahmed.
yeah,
So
Salvon
like,
Ahmed.
what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not sure about that run game and about that offensive line. So just puts a lot on Tua, and I just don't know if he's going to be able to do that.
yeah, yeah, for sure. But I still think like looking at the whole roster as a whole, especially the coaching staff, I think it's not clear, but they're definitely the second best team. And then right behind them, as it was last season, second and third, the New England Patriots. They drafted Mac Jones in the first round, 15th overall, first time ever in Belichick's tenure. Cam Newton's still the starter for how long? We don't know. Obviously, it's still a Bill Belichick coach defense, so we know that they're always going to be toward the top of the league, much like the Dolphins and Brian Flores of the Bill Belichick tree. They're going to keep them in football games, especially bringing back somebody like a Donta Hightower, who was a COVID opt out last year, and bring back a couple of COVID opt outs. So they're going to be back in here. They signed Matt Judon to a lot of money, definitely not worth it. Uh, but Joe, I'm looking at this offense. Not only are there questions at quarterback between Cam Newton and Mac Jones, but you're going to say his name, but Nelson Aguilar is the number one wide receiver listed on the depth chart
Right.
here. And obviously, he had a great year last year in Oakland. He actually caught the football. But then Nelson Aguilar, Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne, N'Keal Harry, first round pick a couple years ago, wants to be traded. And as we mentioned, the running game, I mean, it's Damian Harris, James White still there, Ramon Stevenson. Like, what is this offense going to do? Like, nothing tells me looking at this depth chart right now on my other screen is saying, like, this offense is going to be one of the better offenses in the NFL.
Right. Yeah, no, that's kind of my thinking as well. I think that the formula for a really successful season for New England is strong defense, which we expect, and a strong run game, which I think starts with Cam Newton. I think if Cam Newton can, have a little bit of a bounce back year. I mean, before he got COVID, he was having a really good start to the season,
Yeah.
and they had really kind of designed that offense around him and his running abilities. So I mean, if he's able to, kind of bring the juice in that regard and take a little bit of pressure off the rest of the offense, two very good tight ends that they spent top five contracts on both of them with Hunter Henry and Johnny Smith. So I mean, if Cam Newton's running the ball well, and he's able to he got the middle of the field work in the middle of the field with those two tight ends, and then it kind of helps open up things a little bit more for Nelson Aguilar and some of those other not so great wide receivers, then I think that's a formula for a successful season. But now, if Cam gets injured or this COVID stuff gets more blown out of proportion, or they just aren't doing well, and they go with Mac Jones, then I don't really see a formula for a successful offense because like we said, I don't see you know any studs in the run game. I don't see any studs that are going to help make his life easier out wide on a consistent basis. And I mean, it's nice to have a couple tight ends as safety blankets, but you know, from an Eagles fan perspective, I've had Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert the last couple of years as our best two receiving targets, and it's a boring, slow, like plodding, methodical offense that's devoid of big plays, and just really puts a lot of stress on your offense to be perfect in order to move the ball down the field and get points. So I don't really see that happening for Mac Jones and that offense if that's kind of what it comes to. Um, so I just don't really feel great about the Patriots overall, kind of because of that. And I just feel like a lot of these free agency signings were a little bit panic moves, especially after Brady leaves them and wins the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, they brought in Hunter Henry and Johnny Smith, two very good tight ends. So you're definitely right. It's definitely going to be a boring offense, ground and pound, open up the play action with either Cam Newton or Mac Jones. Heavy tight end usage. Now, they just need to stay healthy. I think both are kind of dealing with some tweaks here and there, Hunter Henry and Johnny Smith. And they have a very favorable schedule to start the season. And then it does get a little bit tough towards the end, which could be interesting. But they played Buffalo in week 13 and 16. So if they can, get some momentum, that could be huge for both teams. And now, Joe, before we end the episode, we do have to talk about the New York Jets. And, they got a new coach this year. They got Robert Saleh, as we all know, is a great defensive coach with the 49ers. And they drafted Zach Wilson, coined as Mormon Mahomes by my friend Dave. Shout out Dave, who's looked really good in the preseason, at least in week 2. Week 1 was a little bit shuffled, but as you said with Devonta Smith, first game jitters, finally in pads, finally playing a different team. They also got Corey Davis in the offseason. They drafted Elijah Moore. So they have put some pieces in place to give Zach Wilson some weapons. Tevin Coleman's the starting running back. Now, that is, at least according to the depth chart right now, that's interesting.
Right.
But the Jets are not going to be a great football team, but they're still going to show some promise. So what would be a successful season in your eyes in year 1 of Saleh and Zach Wilson? Is it just be competitive in every game, get 5 or 6 wins, or do they have higher expectations?
I think that, kind of like you said, I mean, this isn't a year where we should expect them to, be, a competitive team in the division, but this has been a team that has been the worst football team in the NFL over the last couple of years with Adam Gase. No fight, no juice to this team, like big loser energy all over the place. It just has not been a fun team to watch or to, if I was a Jets fan, to root for. So I think that this year is just kind of hoping to see the positives. Zach Wilson having a promising rookie season, and developing that chemistry with Elijah Moore and Corey Davis, a former first-round draft pick. Robert Saleh kind of changing the culture there. So right. I think that's the biggest thing. They've got to have a huge culture shift. And I think Saleh can definitely do that. It's just hard to measure that on the field with wins and losses and stats. I think that we'll be able to kind of tell if these guys are a different type of team than we've seen them be under Adam Gase, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where that Carl Lawson injury really is unfortunate because you definitely want to see some edge rushers there. But if we can see that defense take some steps, Zach Wilson show promise, and chemistry with the young guys and their left tackle Becton, take that next step as well. I really think that it can be an encouraging season for the Jets, even if it doesn't look great on the wins and losses.
That's the key word, Joe. There, right there, is encouraging. Now, I don't think too many Jets fans are expecting Zach Wilson to be like Justin Herbert when Rookie of the Year, put his team in a position to compete for the playoffs. By no means, I hope that they don't expect that. If not, it's going to be a very disappointing season for them. But I think encouraging is the key word. If they can get 5, 6, maybe even 7 wins, depending on how the ball rolls here and there, especially with that defense. And you said it with Robert Saleh, they're going to bring that intensity. They're going to be a little bit more aggressive. Adam Gase, very calm. And let's just go. Robert Saleh is going to be like, all right, we're going to come in ready to punch. And I think part of it, they know that. They're like, hey, we might not have the most talent, but let's show some signs. Let's still get an early pick, whether they go in the draft next year, kind of beef up that right side. I mean, they got Mekhi Becton last year. They drafted Elijah Vera Tucker this year. That's the left side of the offensive line. Maybe they work on the right side next year. I mean, but Corey Davis, Jamison Crowder, Keelan Cole, Denzel Mims, they drafted him last year, as well as Elijah Moore. So they're definitely giving them some options. Zach Wilson. Running game's going to be a little bit interesting. I mean, Tevin Coleman's listed as number 1 right now. Ty Johnson and Michael Carter. Big fan of Ty Johnson specifically in the passing game, but when Tevin Coleman's in front of you, Joe, it's a little tough.
Yeah, I think that'll eventually be Michael Carter. He's also a weapon in game as well. Yeah. He was that kind of receiving back at UNC, and has some very good running ability as well. So I think that he's a guy to keep an eye on there for that backfield to eventually take it over.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. Ty Johnson. Oh, we went to Maryland for it. Yeah, but that's pretty much all I have to say about the Jets. I think they're
Yeah,
obviously the fourth. Patriots, Dolphins. I think it's a toss up like last year, depending on the tiebreakers or whatever. I think the Dolphins are a better team, but you can't rule out Bill Belichick and that defense that we'll
exactly.
have, and then the Bills first place. But Joe, any final thoughts on today's episode? Whether it's about the AFC East, the NFC West, news, football. What are your final thoughts before we wrap up here?
These are two really good divisions, in my opinion. Obviously, we know with the NFC West how good they are, and just how competitive of a division that is. But the AFC East, props to the Bills for Tom Brady's gone, and the Bills are diving into that window right now, and just really trying to become that new juggernaut in their division. So I think it's kind of interesting to see how in the NFC West, it's like we don't know year in year out which team is going to be that team. But in the AFC East, it's been New England for the longest time, and now we're
Right.
seeing a little bit of a changing of the guard with the Buffalo Bills. Expected to kind of dominate that division for the foreseeable future. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I'm excited, man.
Yeah, I am definitely excited. So excited for preseason week 3, Joe. We still have about half the league to cover, and then as well as our official predictions. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that one. But before you leave, folks, hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel. Now, Joe, any final words of this episode?
I think that's all I got, Timmy B. Hopefully the Eagles get some better play out of their backups in this week 3 game. That'll be something interesting to watch, just how different teams kind of handle the preseason game, since it's the first year where there's not 4 preseason games. So some teams are gonna treat it like the dress rehearsal. Some teams aren't gonna play their starters at all. It's going to be a little bit different for everyone. So I think that's just also something kind of interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Lamar is going to be playing, but he's one of our 2 quarterbacks, so he might be dressing up at least. But anyways, that is Joey D right over there, and I'm Timmy B, and we're wishing you all a great day, and we'll see you soon. Best of luck to your teams this weekend.